Okay, and we're live. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. We're going to do a program about what we learned from the killing of George Floyd. Now, on the 25th of May last year, George Floyd died after ex-police officer Derek Chauvin held his knee unhandcuffed and immobilized Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and more. The release of a bystander's video led to violent demonstrations around the USA and spread quickly around the world in a Black Lives Matters movement, which erupted in 50 countries on all continents of the globe. Chauvin has now been tried and found guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He will be sentenced on the 16th of June, and the 45-year-old could go to prison for 40 years. The pattern of deaths of Black people at the hands of the police has not stopped. Black Americans are still killed at a rate 2.6 times higher than their white compatriots, though they are less than 1/5 of the white population. Today, 1 year on, I'm asking people what they learned from the manner of the killing of George Floyd, both when it happened then and now 1 year later. My guests in the studio are, from the top, Umutoni Thuku-Benzinge, Onyekachi Wambu, and broadcast journalist Priscilla Nwikpo. Let's start off first with Onyekachi Wambu. Onye, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Ted, and great to join you on Tete.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much for coming. Now, Anya, what are you doing at the moment? You're running a Ford still, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm the executive director of the Ford.
And what is the Ford? Well, what is the Ford principally doing now? What's their main opus right now?
Our focus has always been about how we harness the resources of the African diaspora for development in Africa. And our programs that we have going is trying to get the diaspora to invest in SMEs and to basically create jobs and grow that SME sector. And then we also
you mean in Africa, back home in Africa? You mean?
Yeah, in Africa. We work in the Benin Republic, and soon we'll be in Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal. And then we also have a project called Return of the Icons, where we're trying to return all the stolen African, looted African icons, artifacts, in British cultural institutions, and also human remains.
God, yes. I see that. Now, so, Anya, it was 1 year ago that the whole world kind of blew up over the horrific killing of George Floyd. What did you make of the manner of his death at the time and the world's response to it at the time, a year ago?
Well, we saw the initial trending of on the outrage. To be honest, I still haven't seen the tape because I made a decision a while ago not to watch snuff movies, and there seemed to be a new genre of watching Black people die on camera that I wasn't going to be part of. So I still haven't seen it, but obviously everybody was outraged. And what was interesting from the response was the international nature of the Black Lives Matter movement and the way, because of lockdown, and we had the time to sit down, to process, to research, people began to understand what was happening in America, not just about this particular instance, but about the history of America, and then how America sat in that broader creation of the West. And so really, we began to have a conversation across the Western world about white supremacy and racism and their role in the making of the West. And that was, we were finally able to name this thing that I think for a long time we've been grappling with in all our different locations. But gradually what you saw was this kind of global analysis. And then, of course, it then inspired, other movements in Africa with the Lagos protest, where if Black Lives Matter in relation to white people, it ought to matter also in relation to other Black people. So we saw a movement, growing on the African continent itself, that wanted to talk about these issues. So for me, those were the major things that I think came out of it.
Okay, so there's a public dimension to the way in which Floyd died, but there must have been a personal dimension in it for you as well, because I remember thinking at the time that, my God, I watched the video several times, and I thought to myself how horrific, how scary this was. How on earth do people expect me to rock up to work and behave as if nothing has happened? So it had a deeply impactful impact on my personal life. How did it affect you?
Well, there were three events that happened at the same time, and in terms of the reaction that everybody had, personally, it was those three events and that sequence of the three events that, for me, led to the explosion. And I think the first was the young middle class woman who called the police on somebody who had asked her to restrain her dog
Right,
in Central Park,
right,
and both of them, ironically, have the same surname. So what you were seeing was a reenactment of the kind of plantation situation where
right.
she, a few generations ago, her people could have owned him, and then all that trope of the helpless white woman then getting the black guy lynched,
Yeah,
and you've seen that whole history play out. And then
yeah.
the second uh, incident that happened at the same around by that time was the father and son uh,
hmm
police officers who then hunted down, uh,
Chased him down.
chased him down and shot her. I think,
Right.
yeah. And again, it was the patrol of
Right.
people
Vigilantes, effectively. Yeah.
chasing after the escaped uh, enslaved person. So suddenly we were back, 200 years ago
Yeah.
with these three events, and I think people made the connections,
Yeah.
and that was what struck me the most. And I think people were like, "No, we're not, Trump or no Trump, we're not going back 200 years. This has to stop."
Okay. So how do you find the sensitivity of society to have been? I mean, when Black Lives erupted, it went to 50 different countries around the world. I mean, there
Mm.
were places like Sweden, Japan, parts of Australia, Poland, which Germany, which historically have not really had any kind of truck or traction with civil rights movements vis-a-vis Black people. But now all of a sudden the thing just exploded. Why now? I mean, these things have been happening in America for years.
Well, I think lockdown was also a big factor. People had
Right,
time on their hands,
right,
um, as I said, to process this stuff, to do further research,
right.
and I also said that what we did, I mean, Sweden, Denmark, all these countries, Denmark, even the smaller ones,
hmm
did go out, and
hmm
Denmark had forts along the African coast, so they all did participate in the
hmm
creation of the West.
hmm
And
hmm
I think, and then the role of white supremacy in all of that was what was being critiqued. And I think we came to the conclusion that a lot of, there's been a 400-year kind of engagement, a 400-year interaction, and
Right,
African people have done badly out of that.
right,
And unquestionably, in terms of all the statistics, you can see that we've done, and we were brutalized within that. All these countries, many of them had colonies, many of them had plantations in the West Indies and elsewhere.
right,
It was a big imperial process, and
right.
then finally, the other reason why now is that
Mm-hmm.
we are at a very important place geopolitically,
Mm-hmm.
where that whole Western uh, kind of domination and hegemony is under immense strain, and you see now that the East is rising, China's rising, so it's very vulnerable, and we're beginning to look back almost at the end of an era,
Right.
or an age in history.
Okay.
For 400 years up until 1985, for at least 300 years, the most important global
Mhm.
trade corridor in the world was across the Atlantic.
Right.
And then in 85, it became across the Pacific from America to Asia.
Right.
And then
Right.
by 2050, it's going to
Mhm.
be within Asia.
Mhm.
So we can see that the shift is fundamentally underway.
Mhm.
Something is declining, and when it declines, you're beginning to look back, and you're beginning to name it. You're beginning, to really understand what it did, because
Mhm.
that age is ending, and so that was also
Okay.
part of the processing.
Okay. What?
I'm why this moment in time.
Okay. So Anya, what do you think is going to be the change in the future? It's 1 year on. We've seen a number of young black people still get shot by the police under very, very questionable circumstances. What do you think we're going to look forward to?
Well, the police and police brutality was one thing that came out, but what people did was to look at all the other areas. It was kind of the institutional kind of analysis that people did,
Mm.
and the role of black people. So what we're looking at is, I would suspect, if, and it depends on us, is how do we renegotiate
Hang on. Who's us, Anya?
uh,
You mean
uh,
black people?
us people of African descent,
Got it.
uh,
Yeah.
how we renegotiate
Yeah.
the relationship with the Western world, and that's what it is. We have been co-creators of this Western world,
Hmm.
although we've never been acknowledged as it.
Right.
And now that Western world is declining. It's facing a huge competition from the China and the East, and
Mhm.
if it's going to face that in any kind of way that would allow it to be resilient and cope with it, it's going to have to look at itself and its own internal
Structure.
composition and the forces within it, and begin a negotiation. So for me, that's the negotiation that we should be having on a broader scale. And then obviously that will look at all the different areas: trade, dignity. So it's not just about the police. It's much
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's much more
Understood. Are you
fundamental.
hopeful that? Are you hopeful that that negotiation is going to start taking place meaningfully? I mean, led by who? What, the current crop of African leaders?
No, I think
Excuse
what
me if
what
I
was it?
sound somewhat incredulous.
What was interesting was, the current couple of African leaders haven't really put these issues on the agenda. In the end, it was mass movements that,
Yeah.
and they started running after when people were demonstrating. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Mhm.
you can't rely on them. A lot of them are compromised. They're there as a result of, protection, or placed there by other interests. So you can't rely on them necessarily. But it is about how well we are able to articulate this, the organizations we form to advance these interests, and also some of the more hopeful things that have happened as a result of what the last year is just the amount of movement that there's been. Um,
Mhm.
and people attempting to set up different kinds of structures and organizations. Let's hope that they endure, because they didn't after the 60s. Some of them were attacked and destroyed, like the Panthers and others, deliberately. But we also, if we value organization and everything else, then we have to ensure that this time around some of those organizations endure, and continue to then articulate a vision for how we conduct this renegotiation,
So,
which is going to happen.
okay, good.
What we get out of it is what we put in, as they
Put
say.
into it. Okay. So you're looking towards kind of a grassrootsy movement, a more of a people-led movement rather than a kind of charismatic political leader led movement, or if that happens, he would have to tap into what the grassroots and what people, ordinary people,
or she.
or
So
she.
yeah, I mean, when somebody says, when the movement starts, then the leaders come out.
Yeah.
What I mean? They come out of the movement, and it tends to be those who have the charisma, who have the authentic voice. Just after the
Ride the wave.
war, that movement started for civil rights in America, and King emerged as premier leader. But then there were others. There was Malcolm X. There were, Stokely Carmichael, who then changed his name to Kwame Ture. So there were, other leaders emerged, and there were leaders, poets in the cultural field, in sports, Muhammad Ali. It's a movement. So you're going to find, and last year we saw that with Hamilton, with Lewis Hamilton emerging in sport, with the tennis player, the Japanese, the African Japanese young woman. I can't remember her name.
Yes, yeah, I know who you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't remember her name. She's
Osaki.
Yes.
Sorry, say that again.
Osaki.
Yes.
Naomi Osaki. Well done.
So you saw a lot of people come in and take leadership positions.
Okay, good.
But now it's about organization.
Right. I have to move on. Anya, thank you so much for your insights and so on. I'm going to move next to Umutoni Thuku-Benzinge for her take on what happened at the killing of George Floyd. Umu, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
First, a little bit about yourself. You have a fashion brand, don't you?
Yes, I have a jewelry brand called Kaleidoscope Beauty, which is a jewelry brand that's all about showcasing the beauty of Africa and really empowering the disenfranchised community. So all of our pieces are handmade in Kenya, in communities that are actually often overlooked. So mainly with 2 slums, Kibera being one, another one being Babandogo, with local artisans, showcasing the beauty of our wonderful continent.
Excellent. So tell me, you're of course kind of from East Africa yourself, aren't you? You're part Kenyan, part Rwandese.
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a bit of perspective on that. Tell me, what did you feel when you watched that tape? Anya said that he actually decided not to watch it because it was too much. What did you feel when you saw the killing of George Floyd 1 year ago today?
It was a very heartbreaking thing to watch, if I'm completely honest with you, which I think everybody would agree with. And it really just showed the shocking reality of the state of racism at the moment, And I think there were a number of questions that came out after that, because I thought, okay, man, like imagine the number of people who, as you said at the very beginning, there's a high percentage of young Black men and women who are dying at the rate of, due to police, but it's not captured on video. It's not captured for the world to see. There's no big outrage because of it, and it really just showed the level of injustice and lack of equality. And it was a very infuriating thing to watch. Very heartbreaking. Definitely cried a few times.
It's interesting that Anya and I come from a certain generation. You're from a kind of more millennial kind of background with all of this, and there is a sense I got at the time that maybe we have seen these things come and go a lot more. But for you, kind of coming up in the age of news clips and social media and so on and so forth, this would have been really quite a striking impact on your life. I mean, how did it affect your day-to-day life?
Yeah, so day to day, it was, I'd actually just left my 9 to 5. I'd actually just left, I took a redundancy pack. And to be honest, I was very happy to be in that position, because I could not imagine trying to go into the office and trying to pretend it was just a normal day. It was a very emotionally charged kind of period. But I empathize with a lot of my friends and family, and, just who were having to continue as if it was a regular day, you know?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I mean, if I may say, if I may share with you, I mean,
Yeah.
at the time, what I noticed was that although this was 24/7 on the news agenda, none of my white friends wanted to talk about it.
Addressed it. Yeah, exactly.
Not one. And now, whatever their motives were for that, it's only for them to say. But my take out of it was that you are ignoring my pain. Actually, do you care even
Do you care?
how I feel? And so that affected me quite profoundly. Did you have a sense of that at all, or didn't it? Or didn't those thoughts, cross your mind?
No, they definitely did cross my mind. I think, as you said, people not even acknowledging that this was going on. People just posting, whether it was on a corporate perspective, was say other social media platforms, say LinkedIn, and there was very little on there that was covering George Floyd, the whole trial, the murder, the video, and it was just shocking because for me it was part of our reality. Whether I wanted to think about it or not, whether I wanted to watch the video or not, it was just something that we had to deal with, and it was very heartbreaking to see that. I guess for other aspects of society, that's not the case. You can kind of just ignore it because that's not necessarily their reality, or it's not a part of the reality that choose to confront or address.
Okay. So, looking at the situation now, what change, if any, do you expect of the future? I mean, let's face it, at the time Trump was in charge, everybody knows Trump is a bit of a right-winger. He was all about MAGA, make America great again, and everybody kind of read this as basically a dog whistle and a trope for white supremacism, though he would deny that, of course, completely. But now we got Joe Biden, and his vice president is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is part Asian, part black. She's certainly a person of color, so-called person of color. And he has packed his cabinet with people. I mean, it looks like the Rainbow Coalition of human beings. No, literally, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what do you expect? How do you expect things to roll from here?
That's a great question. I would love for the fact that Biden is in power, that it just reverses the hands of time, but that's not the reality. I think what this whole year has shown us is that society has been built on racism, like this, it's embedded into society so deep that no one person can be responsible for reversing the cause and the impact. And I think we are talking from a very American perspective. I think something else that is worth noting is sometimes when I was having conversations with, say, friends of other races or neighbors or just people generally in public, it was that whole view of, oh, but this is the UK, we don't experience racism like that. And that isn't real. That's not true. It's very much evident in our society. It's just a bit more underhand, and actually as the rest, very subtle. But actually 2020 showed us that it wasn't that subtle at all, because when we've just seen everything that's happened with, say, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and some of the conversations that happened within the family or within their various different circles and communities, just even questioning the race of their son, and that being a problem, you can see that racism is as much present here in the UK. And actually colonization just finished not too long ago, and we see the impact.
Right. As you mentioned, Harry and Meghan, I mean, the thing that I felt that was literally a kick in my gut was when he came home with the baby, and the BBC broadcaster, who was a top football fan, and so knew all about the tropes with abuses on the terraces, football terraces, of black people with gorilla chants and bananas being thrown on and so on. And he tweeted the picture of that chimpanzee in a top hat coming home. I just thought to myself that, when I had my first child, the whole world was out there rooting for me, and yay, you've done it, and like so many well wishes. And I just thought to myself, I wonder how I'd have felt if when I brought GT home, people were sending out tweets like that. That was quite devastating, and it goes to what you're saying.
Very devastating, yes.
Yeah. Can I just say that, I mean, I loved Onya's analysis of the broader trends that are going on, and from what he's saying, if I've understood him right, he's saying that really it's up to we as people, and what we as people are going to get depends on what we as people would like to see. So, but my final question to you, Umutoni, is what would you like to see in the whole arena of institutionalized racism and so on and so forth? Something really practical and concrete, not just I want it to end.
Exactly. I mean, ultimately, equality is what we'd like to see. And it's important to also note that equality it's a right. It's not a privilege. It's not something we shouldn't have to fight and protest about.
Clapped for society for achieving equality. It's about like brushing your teeth. Nobody clapped for you for brushing your teeth. It's basic.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess also following on from that, there's been a number of positive things that have come out of it. I think as somebody who owns an e-commerce brand, I think something that was really pushed forward and started last year, July, I believe, is Black Pounds Day, which is kind of just highlighting the importance of building our own communities and economy and supporting other Black businesses, Black founders, because everybody starts from somewhere, and just being a lot more conscious of how we spend our money. Being more conscious of where we give our time, our attention, and also just raise awareness of things that are going on within our community. So that has been something that's been positive, I would say. Definitely very eye-opening, and then just wanting to learn more about racism. For me personally, as a Kenyan, I started reading more and say that the Mau Mau movement in Kenya, and it again, a very emotional read. I haven't finished it, if I'm completely honest, just because of the emotional impact, but it is
right. No, don't gloss over that. This is very, very important. It's a little bit like me watching, kind of videos of surgical operations when they got the body open and it's all blood and guts and gore and so on. It's a very hard thing to watch. And the same thing, I should say, in my case, for these concentration camp flicks. Because I find myself naturally empathizing with the characters who are being portrayed there, and so it's a hard watch. But tell me more about why it's difficult for you to engage with the history of the Mau Mau, for example.
I think the thing that was most, and it's not that I didn't know this, but it didn't end that long ago. My grandparents lived through that. So sometimes when I think of racism, I like to think it was a really long time ago and part of history, but it's very present. It's very it didn't happen that long ago, and you can still see the impacts of some of the systems that have been put in place or other systems that have been broken down. And just to think, had I been born a couple years earlier, I guess maybe 60, 70 years earlier, I have some of this myself. So
you were dealing with it.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for these insights. I've got two lovely guests still waiting. The wonderful Candy Kisseih, who has just rocked up, who I'm going to save, not necessarily the best, but for last. But I'm going to go now to Priscilla Nwikpo, who is a long-time colleague of mine in the past. Somebody's got the radio playing in the background. Can they please switch it off? Whoever it is. Nobody moved, and so I don't know who was the culprit. But hey, it's all right. You're all very clever. Very well done. Okay, so I'm going to come to Priscilla now. Pris, can you step up to the podium? Boom, and there you are, perfectly lit, etc. So, Priscilla, what I know that you're into broadcast projects now. What are you doing?
I'm still very much into broadcasting, and I know I haven't been in front of my usual cameras for a minute, but I've been making programs. I have a documentary that I hope will be ready soon.
Can you give us a
basically
sneak preview? Can you tell us what it's about, or is it all embargoed for now?
Well, actually, it's about COVID-19, the Black community, and the vaccine. I decided to have a conversation with members of the community because I felt that, I didn't really see where they were able to speak and to share their thoughts and views on what was happening. And, we were hearing every day about how they were so vaccine hesitant and so on. Whereas I know so many people around me who have taken the vaccine, who are excited about taking the vaccine, and yet, we were being told on mainstream media that people from the Afro-Caribbean community didn't want to, they were hesitant. So I thought, well, let's go out there and speak to them, let's ask them. We need to know what they're thinking. Is it really the case that, people are hesitant and not wanting to take it? And we found that it's no more than it is in all the other communities that make up the United Kingdom. So, interesting when it comes out.
Look forward to it. When can we expect to see it?
It should be in the coming weeks. Let's call it about 2 weeks. It's been it's in edits at the moment. We had a discussion on the first cut, as it were. So see it soon. Yeah.
Lovely. Look forward to it. So, when Floyd was killed, first of all, did you watch the video?
I did. I could not watch it till the end, but yes, I saw some of it, and I just had to move on because it was traumatic.
Yeah. How did it make you feel? The whole event, the way it was filmed, the way it was put out. This was one thing that nobody could say, well, we're making it up. The evidence was all there right before our eyes. How did that make you feel?
I mean, it was triggering, and as I said, traumatic and extremely annoying. Not forgetting that just a couple of weeks before, we had seen, as it were, on tape, on social media again, the murder of Aubrey. I've forgotten his surname, but he was the young man that was out for a walk during lockdown. And you had these rednecks that just decided he didn't deserve to live. And they
he didn't belong where he was walking, though it was close to his own neighborhood. Yes,
he was out, on his government permitted exercise. And then to have been killed was just, we had just seen that. And then here we were again, yet another. So for me, it was the usual triggering anger, trauma, and I just could not bear to see it through till the end, because I just thought, no, I can't do this. It was just enough for me.
Yeah, it was too much. Tell me, how did you evaluate the sensitivity of society? Now, it's very interesting how when these things happen, you get the demos. The Black Lives Matters demos happen. 50 countries, undeniable. That's on every continent. The only place where Black Lives Matters didn't happen was on Antarctica, and that's because mostly it's penguins there. Human beings don't live in Antarctica. But then when it comes down to the personal life range, your colleagues, your associates, your white friend. I mean, if you'd met me about this, we'd have had a chat. We'd have mentioned it. We'd have moved on. But was it taboo to talk with white people one-on-one about what happened? Did you experience?
Yes and no. But I tell you what I thought was interesting in that period to see.
Yeah.
And the lockdown meant that we all spent our lives online. So we were engaging online and engaging with strangers, friends alike. And it was interesting to see the trigger of white companies now we're creating more allyship, if you like. wanting to say in, for instance, some were standing very much by, the Black community. I saw a lot of things online where, if you made a racist comment or if you was said that you were of race, that you were racist, it affected your jobs. And you had companies that were making the stand and the statement to say, we're not going to tolerate racism in our company. So we saw that. And then we obviously, when we had, the brief release, as I call it, from prison, we saw the whole situation with the statutes where, racism, the subject of racism and discussion became so rife that we were now discussing histories and supposed heroes. And so we saw the whole situation in Bristol. We saw it in the United States. Also, and of course, Churchill is still being guarded as we speak. His statue is still being guarded as we speak. So we saw a lot of that. And for me, I thought it was great to see the conversations online, to read the request of what do I do? What do we need to do in order not to be racist? What do we don't know what to do. We want to learn. I know that some people were using that as an excuse to justify their behavior, but I don't think all of them were. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We need to understand that before we are all born, the structure of racism and the narrative already exists. So we come into it, and the white people are taught, and we're all taught, white, black, yellow, green, whatever our said color is. We're all taught to dislike one another because of our skin tone. And we're taught to think and to accept that the Caucasian race are the better race. And so you find that, that's already long established. And so you're more likely to find that most people of the Caucasian race, they may have more racist tendencies, but they don't necessarily realize that they are being racist because it just comes from, what their environment or what they're familiar with or what they've gotten away with. So on that note, it was good to see those questions, and it was good to be able to direct people to say, read this book. When we say this, pay more attention. Think of us as human beings. Don't see us as, because I think the primary problem we have is that Black people are not looked at, or people of African descent. We're not looked at primarily as human beings. We are seen as anything but. And as a result, the way we're treated, the things that are thrown at us, the things that we are having to live with and live through on a daily basis, it is quite traumatic for us, but normal for others. So, that conversation was important, I think.
Okay, terrific. I mean, two questions arise really here. One, was it easier for these conversations to take place because you knew you wouldn't be doing it face to face, say over the coffee machine or the water fountain in the office? But now you could do it over Zoom, and we all know that when you're socially distanced via social media, people find all kinds of freedoms. That's the first question. And the second question is that how do we deal with that social taboo of let's not talk about race, which is absolutely an unwritten law? Please feel free to tell me that, Teta, you're living on planet Zog, because I don't recognize that situation. But how do we deal with this unwritten law that thou shalt not discuss race with white people? But first, the social media question. Was it easier to talk because of social media? And Candy, we're going to come to you quite soon, so stay with us.
Yes, it was easier to discuss it because we were all online and we're all hiding behind our keyboards. Right. So it made it easier for us like I said, especially for those who would use it as an excuse. Made it easy to say, I'm not really that, and I didn't know, I didn't understand. It also made it easy for those who were afraid to be able to ask the questions and, if you like, relinquish their fear. So, so yes, it made it easy for that to happen, and it also made it easy for the conversation to be broader and for more participation. Because if it's on a social media platform, anybody from anywhere around the world can connect to that and contribute to that conversation. So, so yes, so it did all of that. Now, as to whether or not it's difficult to discuss race, I believe, we've made it in such a way that I think that race has been used by authority. When I say authority, I mean governments, if you like, to continue the segregation. Let's look at Stephen Lawrence, for instance. A case that is very famous here for those of us in the UK, where a young man was killed, and 6 people who were responsible, I think there were 5 or 6 people who were responsible, participated in his death to date, are yet to be prosecuted. Out of that, we had the whole McPherson report. We concluded by the McPherson report that our police was institutionally racist, and there were recommendations made. But to date, these recommendations are yet to be implemented. There have been so many other reports since then that have yet to implement the recommendations that were made equally. So you see, it's difficult to discuss race because we've turned it into, I think it's being weaponized. It's more of a case of we're making a sector of society feel we're turning people against each other. That's what it's always been. That's what the structure has always been there to do. But when it's being made worse, where you have people who are afraid to discuss it for fear that they may be attacked, or they don't know where to start from, or the fear, general fear, has been created. Instead of us to look at it as a conversation that we need to have, which is what George Floyd did for us, and which is also, as you mentioned earlier, you mentioned President Trump, which is also something that President Trump inadvertently did for us, because his attitude towards race was so appalling that it made everybody sort of sit up, because nobody wanted to be like that. So it meant, again, we were having to have this conversation about race. So it's been weaponized and made, so people don't want to approach it with ease and see it as a conversation that is necessary, that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't, require force, or doesn't have to be a weapon, as it were.
Right. Okay. Look, Priscilla, these are terrific insights. I want to go. There's something funny happening on my screen here, but I'm going to go now to Candy, if I may, and ask her to come on board to see. Let's close that off. Okay, Priscilla, thank you very much.
Great.
If you can stay for a little bit longer. At the end of my conversation with Candy, I'd just like to, kind of walk away with each other's impressions of how things are. Or do you have an urgent appointment?
No problem. Hey, Candy, great to see you. It's been a minute.
Okay. Oh, Candy, that's lovely. Thank you so much for coming, as usual. It's a pleasure to see you. Can I hear you?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Sorry, I was mute.
Okay, that's terrific. You're online now. Candy, but everybody knows who you are, of course. But for those who've been living under a stone, please introduce yourself very briefly, and let them know who you are.
I'm Candy. I am actually on Kiki's Chat. I have a show every Wednesday, and I talk about things pertaining to women, children, Black people especially. And it is all to raise morale, to empower, to help, to aid, to bring to the fore anything at all that needs to be discussed.
Okay.
So that's what I am. And Priscilla is a friend of mine, actually. So
you should get to know all the people on the stream, because they're all wonderful people, one way or another. Now, Candy, tell me, first of all, did you watch the video?
I didn't watch all of it because I found it very difficult to watch. But I did see the guy with his hand in his pocket enjoying the ride on George Floyd's neck, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just so harrowing and so shocking that I just couldn't carry on watching. So I'm one of those people who never saw how he was carried away, how it all ended. I couldn't watch it. I just could not watch it. And every time it came on, I would do something else. I just couldn't.
Flip the channel or whatever. I see. So what did you learn from A, the manner in which Floyd was killed, and B, the resulting kind of social uproar surrounding it? Because Black people have been killed for hundreds of years in America and nobody gave a damn. This time, this one Black person is filmed being killed, and it spreads to 50 countries around the world with pictures of slavery billionaires being tossed into the river in Bristol here in the United Kingdom. What did you learn from all of that?
What I learned is that if it is in your face to the point where, you know, as you said, Black people are being killed, but they've been killed for centuries, they've been taken into slavery, they've been subjected to all sorts of horrors. But it's all either news that you hear it after it's happened. Mm-hmm. However, this was right in our face. It was happening. The whole death was unfolding in front of us, live on television. Somebody was showing it happening. And for some people, for Black people, it was painful to see. For white people, some of them, it was embarrassing to be confronted with it so vividly that I think it changed the balance of people's view. And when I say people, I'm talking about white people, because for us Black people, this is a constant. This is something that happens on children are killed. And, you know, he has a toy gun, he's playing in his own garden, he's shot. People are, this happens all the time, but something happened to people's psyche. Now, you must remember, though, that this is a time when we were all under lockdown. Everyone was at home. Everyone was watching the news, the television. So it was in our faces. We could see it right there. And it was horrible.
Yeah, sure. See, one of the interesting things, and Anya mentioned this as well, was that I felt that on account of the lockdown and the consent, there was a lot of fear going on at the time about this awful virus. Nobody knew which way it was going to go. In Britain, we were being told about Nightingale hospitals and how the NHS could possibly be swamped. At that time, there was no vaccine in sight. So everybody was key to quite a level of anxiety and fear. And it seemed to me at the time that this was the first time white folk had ever been at that level of personal risk and threat to their security. And it just made me feel as if, on account of that, to a great degree, suddenly they could empathize with other people who felt at risk and threatened and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, that was a huge igniter of their response. What do you make of that?
No, exactly what you said. I mean, they were confronted with it at a time when they themselves were vulnerable. Now, I mean, if everyone was healthy and getting on with their lives, they couldn't even pretend that they didn't see it. But where were you? You were there. You were watching the telly. You were at home. You were in lockdown. Where were you watching? So it was something which was stark. It was there in their face. Right. And that's the difference. That is the difference with this case. However, with your long question, whilst we've all seen it, whilst it's in everyone's face, in every race, color, creed, what it also demonstrates to me is that these things are still happening. You know, there are people who have the community spirit, who will kind of come out and scream and shout and, you know, in consternation about this. But then, you know, there are those who, after a while, it wears away. They go back to their normal because Black people are being killed all the time. I have an issue where the American president, for example, comes out this week and says, you know, in a statement,
right,
there has been no protest, there has been nothing said, there have been no 100 million people, men marches, there have been nothing. And he has quickly said that he is passing a law against people attacking Asians. Is there a law against people attacking Black people? No. Is there? Is there one that I don't know about that somebody wants to educate me on it? Therefore, I just think it was, you know, in the crest of a wave, something was happening. We all saw it somewhere in Paris, this, that, and the other. Nothing has changed. I mean, I watched the court case where Derek Chauvin, the guy who had his knee on George Floyd's neck.
Yeah, the murderer.
And the shock in his eyes, the way his eyes were darting about, looking to see if anyone else was, is this true? Are they, you know, he may have thought that he was going to go into prison for 9 months and come back and lead a normal life.
Okay.
You know, so even that demonstrated to me that although he was in trouble at that time, he was just being used at that moment, and that life was going to go back to normal, and it has. Police are still killing people.
Okay.
Police are killing people for traffic.
It just didn't go back to normal for him. It just didn't go back to normal for him.
It didn't go back to normal for him. And, you know, it then brings you to another thing, which for the Christians and the religious people will say that there are certain people on this earth that if you did something to them, your retribution is swift. And that is what has happened to the person who killed George Floyd. That was his start. That is what he came with. That was what he was coming to do on this earth. The rest of them are going to be killed because it's not their star. That is how I see it.
That's interesting. Well, of course, I mean, you're entitled to your religious views on that one. But Candy, what do you expect now to happen? I mean, what you're saying is that actually we're back to business as usual. Black kids are being shot and killed in traffic stops, and so on. And actually, the rate of police killings haven't gone down. There's an American organization that monitors these things, and it kind of averages between 1,000 and 1,150 per annum. And the proportions of whites, Native Americans, actually, Native Americans are even more likely to be killed by the police, 3 times more likely than white people. For Black folk, it's 2.6 times more likely to be shot by the police as white people. So what do you think the future holds, Candy?
Unless a bold act is passed in America, all of the Western world, unless something is addressed, nothing will change. Now, marches have been had. People have complained. Groups have been, you know, everything. Black Lives Matter has come out. Everything is happening, and yet nothing has really changed. And anyone who are on these marches and people who are making these noises are being labeled as troublemakers. And continually, the press, the media, social media, the trolls, all of these people are boldly making statements, abusing, denigrating. Where do you think this is going to go? I don't know. I think that society is a very dangerous, you know, look, racism is more dangerous than the coronavirus.
Right.
This is how I see it.
Right. That's a fascinating statement. Look, Candy, with that, I'm going to end it here. And it's a shame Onyeka seems to have left, but I'm going to bring the rest of our guests back with us into the studio. It's a real shame that Onyeka has gone. Umutoni, Priscilla, you've heard the conversation we've had so far this evening. What are you taking out of it all?
Well, for me, I think it's such a shame that we've not seen much changes. But then the change isn't going to come by just society. In order for us to see real change, we need governments to come on board. Just as Candy said there, with the new administration in the US, there's a law that has been made concerning Asians. But we don't see such being made concerning people of African descent. Right. So that's the kind of step that's needed for us to see true change. I'm not excited, and I don't, so even with the current, we're waiting for the sentence, right? I'm not excited. It may be a disappointment at the end of the day. But for me, true change will happen when we see governments also taking those steps.
Stepping up and batting. Umutoni, what's your take on all of the conversation that you've heard so far tonight?
Yeah, I agree with Priscilla. With regards to the sentencing is yet to be completed. Again, also not holding my breath. Don't know what that will look like, and it's a tough question to answer, to be completely honest. I mean, we have to be hopeful as a community, but I think it really is about us coming together, coming together, helping each other as much as possible. There isn't much hope, I would say, with regards to relying on government bodies, on police to protect us. I think it's very heartbreaking to know that George Floyd did die at the hand of police who are in place to protect us, right? That is a very heartbreaking reality, and something that just really does question if that is something that has happened, and it continues to happen, and there's numerous examples that haven't been captured on video. What does that mean for us as a society? And where should we really put our faith? But ultimately, I do believe there will be progress. It will take some time. Trying to find the solutions myself, to be honest.
Okay, terrific. Look, final word, Candy.
I think that the police were they are here to serve and protect the white people of each country, each Western world. The police were set up really in the time of slavery to catch black people, to the runaways, to control black people. There was nothing. They were not here. They're not set up to protect black people. Black people are the ones that they're supposed to be catching and throwing into jail, etc., etc. So,
and killing occasionally, yes.
Yeah, and killing if need be. You don't bring him back dead or alive. That's what the whole thing was about. So unless the police begin to change their concept, this is not going to change. And it's the police really. They're the ones they're the perpetrators. So they need to do something.
Thank you very much. Umutoni, Priscilla, Candy, and earlier with Onyekachi, who made some lovely points as well. Thanks very much for joining me on this broadcast. And please go and see it on YouTube, like it, share it, and comment as you like. Thank you very much, and to all our guests as well for watching us. And we're out. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Good night, ladies. Thank you.
Night. Night and bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.